Satyamayi Parame Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyoti Aravinda Jyoti Aravinda Jyoti Aravinda. Okay, so to begin with, I'll invite you to think of the last time, recent past, where you got hurt through a human interaction, where somebody said something to you or something happened and you got hurt. All of you have one thing like that in mind. So when that happened, you were convinced that harm was being done to you, right? In one way or the other. And you were convinced that it was to you the harm was being done. You were convinced that there's an I here who's being harmed by something outside this I. But who is this I? That's the question. Who is this I? Answer me, let's have a dialogue. Who is this I? Yeah, but in your experience, in the moment when you're hurt, who is this I?
It's your personality.
Your personality. So, the person that you think you are. But is that person fixed? It's changing moment to moment, thought to thought, right? Every thought is giving you a different sense of I. Flattering thought is giving you a happy I. A critical thought is giving you an unhappy I. Your I is changing thought to thought to thought. But you think that the I is one continuous permanent thing, right? And you feel that I is being attacked. Am I correct? But that I doesn't exist. The I arises in a thought, and when that thought passes away, that particular I is gone. Another I arises in the next thought. Are you with me? So to think that there's a frozen permanent self here, and I who gets hurt, is itself a level of ignorance or falsehood, right? And we so zealously defend this I. I'm being disrespected, I'm being undermined, I'm being written off, and we do all sorts of things to protect this I, right? But this I doesn't really exist except as a mental construct in your head, right? So what you said is true. This I ultimately is your sense of ego. And ego is nothing but a conditioned thought pattern. So you keep getting upset about, so Kaira's come, hypothetically I have an interaction with Kaira which upsets me, which makes me feel small or whatever, and I feel Kaira hypothetically has attacked my sense of I. And I'm very convinced about my narrative, I'm very convinced about my sense of I who's being attacked. But sometimes in a dream, I'm very convinced that the dream is real, and I'm very convinced that all the negative things in the nightmare are happening till I wake up. Has that happened? You're super convinced that whatever's happening in the dream is happening till you wake up from it. So every ego pattern that arises and makes you unhappy is simply a dream you're caught up in, and very useful to awaken from the dream and remind yourself that this I, which has arisen, which is feeling affronted, put down, whatever, is just a mental construct. It's a construct of your mind. It has no ontological reality. And you wake up from it and you see that everything that the mind has created about the whole situation, in one sense, is just a dream you're caught up in. Yeah? Now to go deeper into it with Mother's words. Mother says, I have explained this to you, I don't know how many times. You think it is you who decide these impulses coming from outside. You think you are conscious of your will. It is a consciousness which is not yours, and everything you're made up entirely of something which is the forces of nature expressing a higher will of which you are unconscious. Only one doesn't understand this except when one cannot come out of one's ego, though it be only for a moment, for the ego, and this is its strength, is convinced that it alone decides. But if one looks attentively, one notices that it is moved by all sorts of things which are not itself. If you analyze carefully, you see, for instance, that all you think has been thought by others, that these are things which circulate and pass through you. But you have not produced this thought. You are not the originator of this thought. All your reactions come from atavism, from those who gave you birth and from the environment in which you have lived, from all the impressions which have accumulated in you and constituted something which seems to you yourself, yet which is not produced by you but merely felt and experienced. You become aware of it in passing, but it is not you who created it, not you who gave it birth. It could be said that these are like sounds, any kind of sounds, words, music, anything recorded by an instrument, then reproduced by another instrument which plays them back like a gramophone, for instance. You wouldn't say the gramophone has created the sound you hear, would you? That would never occur to you. But as you are under the illusion of your separate personality, these thoughts which cross your mind and find expression, these feelings that pass through your vital and find expression, you think have come from you, but nothing comes from you. Where is the you which can create all that? You must go deep, deep within, and find the eternal essence of your being to know the creative reality in yourself. And once you have found that, you will realize that it is one single thing, the same in all others. So where is your separate personality? Nothing's left any longer. Yes, these are recordings and reproducing instruments, and there are always what might be called distortions. They may be distortions for the better, they may be distortions for the worse, they may be fairly great changes. The inner combinations are such that things are not reproduced exactly as they pass from one to the other, because the instrument is very complex. But it is one and the same thing which is moved by a conscious will, quite independent of all personal will. So what she's saying is that we are convinced that when we are thinking, it is my thought, it is my feeling, it is my this, my that. But Mother says nothing is yours. Everything is sort of being just reproduced, like your subconscious mind. Whatever you hear goes into your subconscious mind, and from there comes up as a conscious thought. So it came to your subconscious mind from your environment, maybe from the past, and then it's stored there and it comes out like, so for example, in the past, if I have been with people who have belittled me a lot, and that pattern of being belittled has gone into my subconscious mind, even when I'm with people who are not belittling me, that pattern plays like a gramophone from your subconscious mind and convinces you you're being belittled and creates a sense of you which is being belittled. And that you which arises, that belittled you, is only a mental construct. It has no reality. So it's wonderful at that time to remind yourself, oh, this hurt I, it is only a mental construct, it is not real. It's just a recording from my subconscious which is coming up and playing itself out. Make sense? There's nothing separate or independent. There is only one substance, one force, one consciousness, one will, which moves in countless ways of being. And it is so complicated that one is no longer aware of it. But if one steps back and follows the movement, no matter which line of movement, one can see very clearly that the vibrations propagate themselves, one following another, one following another, one following another. And in fact, there is only one unity, unity of substance, unity of consciousness, unity of will. And that is the only reality. Outwardly, there's a kind of illusion, the illusion of separation and the illusion of difference. So Mother says, what would you say if a temple built according to the design of some great artist were to boast, admire my merits? Am I not beautiful, well built, solid and durable? Truly am worthy of all praise, just as if it were the author of its own perfections. We would find that very silly and ridiculous. And yet that is what we are doing constantly. We, like the temple, are ignorant of the great consciousness power that has made us what we are. And because we do not perceive the labor of the sublime worker, we ascribe the merit of the works to us, right? So we think whenever we do something well, we immediately think, I'm great. I did this well, I look good, I'm intelligent. But it's as futile as a temple boasting that, look, I'm so good. Because when you look at the beauty of a temple, you praise the architect who made it, right? The temple didn't make itself. So each of us is that temple which never made itself. So to take the blame or the praise for ourselves, it's ignorance. Mother says the ego cannot be destroyed, but it can be overcome by a constant and complete separation from it. This is the necessary preparation I spoke of. So one of the fundamental work of the Mother in each of us is to take us beyond the ego, right? Because ego is what keeps us away from connecting to the truth of what we really are. So this morning we did this beautiful mantra from the Vedas, Om Purnam Ada, that the source is complete and whole. Ada is that, Purnam, complete. Purnam Idam, this I, the manifestation of the source, I am also complete and whole. Why? Because Purnat Purna Mudachyate, wholeness can birth wholeness alone. So it's saying that if my source is whole and I am the becoming of my source, I also have to be whole, because wholeness can give birth to wholeness alone. Then you'll ask that how can I reconcile that I am whole and the world around me is whole when I see so much ugliness, pain, suffering? It doesn't seem whole and perfect to me at all, right? So the point is that the imperfection, the incompleteness is in the realm of thought, right? The voice in our head, which is always making us feel incomplete, which is making us view the world as incomplete. But behind that voice in our head, there's an observing field of awareness. There's an awareness in which the voice arises, right? And that field is always complete and whole. Now, the most important relationship in our life, the most, and listen to this very carefully, is our relationship with our thought. If my relationship with thought is in a state of what Vedanta calls sayujya, identification, if I live identified with my thought, that is, I'm identified with the I in the thought. I said no, in every thought there's an I, and if I live identified with the thought, that I thought, I am miserable, because sooner or later the thought will become a miserable I. But if my relationship with thought is such that I'm not identified with the I in thought, but I'm identified with the awareness field behind, then I am not affected by whatever the thought thinks. For example, there is the sky, and we know that the sky is just an infinity of space. There's no blue there, right? We've done that before. It's just infinite space. So if I take black color and I have a malevolence towards the sky and I fling the black color at the sky won't get stained because it doesn't have a surface that can catch color, right? So the awareness in me is that sky which is impersonal. It doesn't have a personal surface that can be colored. You understand? But if I'm identified with the I in thought, I have a personal surface. I'll take on whichever color is flung at me. But if I am in that field of awareness behind thought, I am the sky which is never stained by anything that's thrown at me. So, in the words of the Vedic rishis who promise us that we are nitya shuddh, eternally pure, because awareness can never be stained, nitya tript, eternally contented and complete, and nitya purna. So, the wholeness that this Vedic mantra speaks of is the wholeness of who we really are, that sky of awareness beyond who we appear to be, the I which is constantly changing in thoughts. So, if somebody hurts us, take that interaction we started with, somebody's hurt us, what is the only thing in us which is capable of being hurt is our sense of I, the ego. The rest, what we are, can never ever be hurt. So, actually metaphors are very beautiful. Imagine this metaphor of somebody taking black color and throwing it into the sky. And the sky is just space, no surface, can't catch the black color, remaining unhurt. So actually shut your eyes and think of the last time you had this interaction where somebody maybe you felt was throwing color, throwing something unpleasant at you. And try and become the sky of awareness which does not receive the color. And keeping that in mind, let's do the Vedic mantra, the Shanti mantra. Purnamada Purnam Idam, that my source is complete and whole. This I, the becoming of that source, is also complete and whole. So I'll repeat each line twice, second time with me. Purnamadaha Purnamadaha Purnat. Just once, okay? I'll say it once, hear me, and then second time everyone together. So let's start again. Purnamadaha Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So once again, bring to mind that last interaction you had with somebody, and the you that got hurt was the I in your thought. But suppose you're not identified with that I. Suppose you're just the observing field behind the I, the awareness space behind the I, the sky that can be never stained by anything thrown into it. And slowly open your eyes. And the same thing really applies even for people who you care for. Very often we hurt because people close to us are in pain, right? Or they are going through something unpleasant. But so beautiful to know that even they are the sky which can actually never ever be hurt, right? They too are this field of awareness which is always kept safe just in being what it is, right? So it can give us great solace to know that actually everyone has a part of them which, as the Gita says, no fire can burn, no water can wet, and no sword can cleave. We all have that inside us, and that can be a great solace to us. Now we come to Mother's words. In fact, the vast majority of men are like prisoners with all the doors and windows closed, so they suffocate, which is quite natural. But they have within them the key that opens the doors and windows. They do not use it. Very often we feel like prisoners. We feel so suffocated by life and circumstances. But they have with them the key that opens the doors and windows, and they do not use it. Certainly there is a time when they don't know they have the key. But long after they have come to know it, long after they have been told about it, they hesitate to use it and doubt whether it has the power to open the doors and windows, or even that it is a good thing to open them. And even when they feel that after all it might be good, there remains some fear. What will happen when these doors and windows are open? And they are afraid. They are afraid of being lost in that light and freedom. They want to remain what they call themselves in quotes. They like their falsehood and their bondage. Something in them likes it and goes on clinging. They still have the impression that without their limits they would no longer exist. That is why the journey is so long and why it is so difficult. But if one truly consented to cease to exist, everything would become so easy, so swift, so luminous, so joyful. Cease to exist as in what? Cease to exist as the I in your thought. Of course you exist. You exist as the I am. But you do not exist as I am Nash or I am Joyan or I am Varun, right? That is a mental construct. You exist as I am, the eternal I am, but not as the ahankar, the akar the aham takes. So Mother says if only we would cease to exist, everything would become so easy, so swift, so luminous, so joyful. But perhaps not in the way man understands joy and ease. In truth, there are very few people who do not enjoy fighting. There are very few who could not accept the absence of night. Few can conceive of light except as the opposite of darkness. Without shadows, there would be no picture. Without struggle, there would be no victory. Without suffering, there would be no joy. People say, mothers put it in quotes, that is what they think, and so long as they think in this way, one is not yet born into the spirit. We are told the divine is in all things. Why don't things change? Because the divine does not get a response. Everything does not respond to the divine. We come back to Sri Aurobindo's symbol. The descending triangle is the descent of Satchidanand into matter, and the ascending triangle is the response it evokes from matter. But the matter does not always respond to the call, and that's why things remain stuck as they are. If you want to help humanity, the Mother says, the world or the universe, the only thing to do is to give that little bit entirely to the divine. Little bit, what you are to the divine. Why is the world not divine? It is evident that the world is not in order. So the only solution to the problem is to give what belongs to you. Give it totally, entirely to the divine, not only for yourself, but for humanity, for the universe. There is no better solution. How do you want to help humanity? You don't even know what it needs. Perhaps you know still less what power you are serving. How can you change anything without indeed having changed yourself? So now there's this long bit Mother has written on individualization and the ego. So the Mother says ego was the helper, Sri Aurobindo says ego was the helper, ego is the bar. So why was ego the helper? In the beginning, when there was, when we hadn't become individualized, see, we are made up of various parts, right? The mental being, the vital being, the physical being. The physical being is individualized. The physical being has a border, it's separate from the rest. But the mental being is flowing into the mental being of the whole universe. So individualizing the mental being is having a mind of your own, as they say. When you don't get affected and change with what people say. An individualized vital is a vital that can hold on to what it feels without changing quickly if somebody suggests a change. And Mother says this individualization is very necessary, because if you don't have a concrete individualized being, what can you offer to the divine? But once that individualization is complete, to stay in it takes you to the path of the asura. Because if you're a very strong individual and you don't have an urge to give to the divine, it makes you very egoistic. So once the ego is formed, it has to be surrendered. So Mother's written about it very, very beautifully. First, one must become a conscious, well-knit, individualized being who exists in himself, by himself, independent of all his surroundings, who can hear anything, read anything, see anything without changing. He receives from outside only what he wants to receive. He automatically refuses all that is not in conformity with his plan, and nothing can leave an imprint on him unless he agrees to receive the imprint. Then one begins to become an individuality. When one is an individuality, one can make an offering of it. For unless one possesses something, one cannot give it. And for the separative ego to disappear, as you say, you must be able to give oneself entirely, totally, without reserve. And to be able to give oneself, one must first exist. And to exist, one must be individualized. If your body were not made in the rigid form it is, for it is terribly rigid, isn't it? Well, if all that were not so fixed, if you had no skin here like this solid, if externally you were the reflection of what you are in the vital and mental fields, it would be worse than being a jellyfish. Everything would fuse into everything else like this. Oh, what a mess it would be. That is why it was first necessary to give a rigid form. Afterwards, we complain about it. We say the physical is fixed, it's a nuisance, it lacks plasticity, it lacks suppleness, it hasn't the fluidity which enables us to merge into the divine. But this was absolutely necessary, for without this, if you simply went out of your body, most of you can't do it, because the vital being is hardly more individualized than the physical. To go out of your body, you need an individualized vital being. Otherwise, you can't do it. If you came out of your body and went into the vital world, you would see that all things are there intermingled. They are mixed, they divide. All kinds of vibrations, currents of forces come and go, struggle, try to destroy one another, take possession of each other, absorb each other, throw each other out, and so it goes on. But it is very difficult to find a real personality in all this. And now in the mind, if only you become conscious of your physical mind in itself. Some people have called it a public square because everything comes there, goes across, passes, comes back. All ideas go there, they enter at one place, leave by another, some are there, some there. It's a public square, not very well organized. But then one becomes aware, what can I call my mind, or what is my mind? One needs years of very attentive, very careful, very reasonable, very coherent work, organization, selection, construction, in order to succeed simply in forming, or simply this little thing, one's own way of thinking. One believes he has his own way of thinking, not at all. And for this to become coordinated, coherent, logical thought, a long, thorough work is needed. So you can read this about individualization on your own. We come to the last paragraph. And then later one offers all this to the divine. Years of work are needed. You must not only become conscious of yourself, conscious in all detail, you must organize what you called yourself around the psychic center, the divine center of your being, so that it would make a single coherent conscious being. This is important, and this divine center is itself already consecrated. Mother makes a gesture of offering entirely to the divine. So your psychic being is always given to the divine. So in Savitri there are beautiful lines about the psychic being, about an invisible presence in the heart which is constantly kneeling down in prayer. Even when I'm cursing, doing all kinds of things on my surface, deep within there is an invisible being constantly kneeling down in prayer. And that's really who you are, your psychic being. So, and so when the divine thinks it proper, when the time has come, when the work of individualization is complete, then the divine gives you permission to let your ego merge in him. Live henceforward only for the divine. But it's the divine who takes this decision. You must first have done all this work, become a conscious being, solely and exclusively centered around the divine and governed by him. And after all, there is still an ego, because it's the ego which serves to make you an individual. But once this work is perfect, fully accomplished, then at that moment you may tell the divine, here I am ready, do you want me? And the divine usually says, yes, all is over, everything is accomplished, and you become a real instrument for the divine's work. But first the instrument must be constructed. So, in the olden yogas, in the Buddha's yoga, his whole thrust was to get enlightened, you have to overcome desire. And that was what his Four Noble Truths were, right? Suffering is there. Desire is the cause of suffering. You overcome desire, you overcome suffering, and then he's given a path to overcome desire. But Mother says that's a very long way. So she's actually made a diagram representing yoga, starting point and end. And she's saying normally you go like this, like this, like this and reach here. But when you're with the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and you're walking the sunlit path, it's a straight line. So what is the straight line? Instead of trying to overcome desire, which takes endless time, give yourself to the divine. The Mother's mantra is remember and offer. Whatever you are, give it to the divine, and that makes the whole path really short. Now, how do you give it to the divine? What does it mean to give to the divine? These are just words, right? In practice, what does it mean to give yourself to the divine? One is remembering her. What else?
To let her take care of everything.
To let her take care of everything, yes, but concretely?
Just be her instrument.
Yes, but how? Because right now we are an instrument of our ego, more or less. So how do we make that change? You be kind to each creation, yes. What else? To basically remember that you don't exist, that only Mother exists. To remember that at every moment when the I comes up in the ego, every moment you give away that I to the recognition that this I doesn't exist, only the Mother exists. That's when you're really offering yourself to the divine. And that's the quickest way to overcome the ego. To give yourself to the divine means to relinquish yourself. So, in fact, we have these beautiful lines from Savitri towards the end of the PDF, but we'll do it here now. Banish all thought from thee and be God's void. Then shalt thou uncover the unknowable, and the superconscious grow on thy tops. Infinity's vision through thy gaze shall pierce. Thou shalt look into the eyes of the unknown. Find the hid truth in things seen null and false. So when I'm looking through a lens, see if I'm looking through a red colored spectacles, I'll see everything red, right? So if I'm looking through lenses which are false, everything I see will be false, right? If I'm looking at the world through my sense of I, my I-ness will color everything and distort it, isn't it? For example, take that I have a pattern in my subconscious that I've always been belittled, and that has come up into my conscious mind, and I'm looking at my interaction with somebody through that lens. Even when that person is not belittling me, I'll see belittlement, because whatever is my lens, I'm seeing through that. So now if that color, if that red color disappears, that red color is the color of the ego, then I'll see the truth. There's a beautiful sutra in Rishi Patanjali's Yoga Sutras where he says that if you have a gem, which is, supposing it has a color, it has a red color, and you put it over a green cloth, the red color is the color of its I-ness. And so long as it's very keen on holding on to its red color, the green below it will never show through. Green is, say, the color of the mother or God or what you really are. But if it releases its I-ness or redness, then the green shows through, right? So if I'm wearing spectacles of the color of my ego, I'll see everything distorted and falsified by my ego. But if the ego is offered to the divine, if it's recognized that you don't exist, only the mother exists, then that redness of that gem starts receding and you see the green color or the blue color, whatever color of Krishna or the mother or whatever, shining through. And then you'll see the truth. So that's what this line is saying. Thou shalt look into the eyes of the unknown, find the hid truth in things seen null and false. Behind things known, discover mysteries rare. Thou shalt be one with God's bare reality and the miraculous world He has become, and the diviner miracles still to be. When nature, who is now unconscious God, translucent grows to the eternal's light, her seeing His sight, her walk His steps of power. Each of us is nature, right? And nature which is now unconscious of God. But it will come a time when nature, who is now unconscious God, translucent grows to the eternal light. When will it grow translucent? When that red gem gives away its redness, then it becomes translucent to the color of the God substrate. Her seeing His sight, her walk His steps of power, and life is filled with a spiritual joy, and matter is the Spirit's willing bride. Consent to be nothing and null. I do not exist, only Mother exists. Consent to be nothing and none. Dissolve time's work. Cast off thy mind. Step back from form and name. Annul thyself that only God may be. You can really give yourself to the Mother, not with a mental, that's a beginning, that I'm doing this for Mother, remembering her, all that is good. Those are beginning steps and they are necessary. But the real gift of yourself to Mother can happen only when you disappear, right? So long as you exist and you believe in your existence separate from Mother, you cannot give yourself to her, because the ego will keep claiming you to itself. And the ego is a phantom, it doesn't exist, it's a mental construct. I keep repeating, whenever you get unhappy, catch the ego in that unhappy thought, the sense of I, and remind yourself this ego does not exist. It's only a mental construct. Yes?
Generally, it also feels, I feel, for most people is whenever we say
Little loud?
Whenever we say get rid of the ego, I feel most people feel it means a loss of freedom.
Yes.
That is a great fear which you would observe in people's minds. But I feel personally that it's not a loss of freedom, it's a realization of true freedom.
Very good, Nash. Absolutely. Ego is your prison. When Mother said in the earlier passage that man is like a prisoner with all the doors and windows closed, that prison is our sense of I. It's constantly judging, it's constantly fearing being judged. It doesn't give you freedom to be because there's this constant self look. But if you're free of that, then that's real freedom, right? That's a very valid point. We are afraid to give away our ego because we feel I won't be free. But ego is your prison, really.
Also, the burden of the ego.
What about it?
Because the burden of the ego is it comes with the cost of being somebody. It's you're always appearing.
Yeah.
So when you surrender that feeling of appearance and you're identified with the truth, you don't need to be anything.
Right, so true. The
That
burden of
context
needing to
goes
appear
away.
disappears. Because actually, our greatest burden is our need to appear. And the fuel for ego is the need to appear. Ego is very easy. I think I did this last Savitri class. Ego is basically the need to appear well in people's minds, right? Because you feel you exist. So you should appear well in people's minds. But, I mean, that I've covered in the last class. People's minds are also a phantom, a dream, and you are also a dream. So you're ransoming your whole life to a dream within a dream, and that's why we are so bound and so not happy. So, yeah, so how, okay, we all know this, but how do we work with it? Whenever the ego comes up, how do I know the ego has come up? I'm unhappy. That's the acid test for the ego. Whenever you're unhappy, the ego has come up very strongly. Yeah, Mother has written, whenever you're unhappy, right below it, you've been insincere. Insincere because you've got identified with the ego in that sense. Simple way is to just sit with it, to see that I arise. Make it your mantra. This I is a mental construct. It's a conditioned thought pattern. It does not exist. What exists is the Mother. So in Sufism, there's this beautiful mantra, La ilaha illallah. Very simply put, it means no God but God. So no God, La ilaha, in the sense of I, there is no God, there's no truth but God. But what's behind this I is God. La ilaha illallah. No God but God. I don't exist, God only is. So what do you see as a difficulty in this practice? How many of you tried doing it as I spoke? Huh? The I seems very real, and the story it has built also seems very real, right? You feel it as real. It's very tangible. All of you agree with her? That's your problem. So what's the answer? How do we see through the unreality of its appearance of real? Come on, try it on your own and tell me. Think of one thing you're bothered by, that's your ego being bothered by it. How will you pull reality out of it?
By not struggling.
So what will you do?
So the first thing is that the one way of
Loud?
One way of knowing that you're very much in your ego is repetition of the same thought process.
Yes.
It's a repetitive cycle.
Yes.
That's a sign that you're very centered on it. It's an attention seeking thing. Ego will always seek your attention.
Yes.
Otherwise it does not go.
Yes.
So somewhere you need to be able to let go of it by a self-surrender that my thought isn't important. That's one thing where we go very wrong is my thought is very important to me.
But it looks very important. So how do I believe it's not?
Mechanically first you need to be able to realize that my thought isn't the final reality. Even at a very rational level, if you can't start with that premise, you won't be able to go ahead.
So rationally tell yourself, however real it appears to be, it's not real.
It can't be the final reality.
It can't be the ultimate truth. Okay, that's one starting point. After that, you can't do it in the realm of your mind. You can't fight the mind with the mind. So do something to make yourself a little quiet. Go into your heart, call down the peace overhead, watch your breath, do whatever works. See, if you're a fish who's caught in stormy waves on the surface of the sea, the only way you'll be safe is if you plunge down to the depth, right? Because in the depth of the ocean, it's quiet. So if there's a storm on the surface, the only way you can be safe is to go into your depths. So somehow make your mind quiet. Let the witnessing consciousness come forward. When it does, from there look at the thought and you'll see it's only a conditioned mind pattern. You'll feel a separation from thought. You'll feel thought is here like a radio playing, but if the song in the radio is about doom and sadness, I, the listener, am not feeling doom and sadness. That's just a song playing in the realm of the thought radio. And so, you know, if this is if you experience this even once, you're quiet enough and you can look at the thought and tell it, you're just a mental construct, you're not real. If you can do it even once, the memory of that, if you draw on when next time it plays up, it will just dissolve. And it's fascinating to see how it dissolves. It's like that scene in Matrix. You all have seen Matrix? Those agents seem so real to Neo. And in the last scene, they just break up into matrix codes. And when he sees the unreality, they can't do anything to him. But so long as they are real for him, they keep attacking him. Okay, so if at mother's words, if at the outset one were to seize the problem bodily, jump into it with courage and determination, and instead of undertaking a long, arduous, painful, disappointing hunt after desire, she is referring to Buddha's path of giving up desires. Instead of that, mother says, if one gives oneself simply, totally, unconditionally, if one surrenders to the supreme reality, to the supreme will, to the supreme being, putting oneself entirely in his hands, in an upsurge of the whole being and all the elements of the being without calculating, that would be the swiftest and most radical way of getting rid of the ego. People will say that it is difficult to do, but at least a warmth is there, an ardor, an enthusiasm, a light, a beauty, an ardent and creative life. It is true that without desire, nothing much remains to sustain the ego, and one has the impression that the consciousness becomes so hardened that if the ego crumbles into dust, then something of oneself also falls into dust and one is ready to enter nirvana, which is annihilation pure and simple. But what we consider here as the true nirvana is the disappearance of the ego into the splendor of the supreme. So beautiful. In the Buddhist nirvana is your sense of I is extinguished at every point. Nirvana means extinguished. But mother's way is so much rich and warmer and more beautiful. She's saying nirvana for me is disappearance of the ego into the splendor of the supreme. And this way is what I call the positive way. the self-giving that is integral, total, perfect, without reserve, without bargaining. In the mere fact of not thinking of oneself, not existing for oneself, referring nothing to oneself, thinking only of what is supremely beautiful, luminous, delightful, powerful, compassionate and infinite, there is such a profound delight that nothing can be compared to it. This is the only thing that deserves, that is worthy of being attempted. All rest is only marking time. The difference is between climbing a mountain by going round and round slowly, laboriously, step by step for hundreds of years and spreading invisible wings and soaring straight to the summit. So she says the way is tough, but self-giving makes it easy. Self-giving is dissolving your sense of I into the truth of the divine. That is really what self-giving is. Now somebody asks Mother, what is meant by the divine gives himself? Mother answers, it means exactly this, that the more you give yourself, the more you have the experience. It is not just a feeling or impression or sensation. It is a total experience that the more you give yourself to the divine, the more he is with you, totally, constantly, at every minute, in all your thoughts, all your needs, and that there's no aspiration which does not receive an immediate answer, and you have a sense of a complete, constant intimacy, of a total nearness. It is as though you carried, as though the divine were all the time with you. You walk and he walks with you. You sleep and he sleeps with you. You eat and he eats with you. You think and he thinks with you. You love and he is the love you have. But for this, one must give himself entirely, totally, exclusively, reserve nothing, keep nothing for himself, and not keep anything back, not disperse anything also. The least little thing in your being which is not given to the divine is a waste. It is the wasting of your joy, something that lessens your happiness by that much. And all that you don't give to the divine is as though you were holding it in the way of the possibility of the divine's giving himself to you. So Mother says that in proportion to how much you give yourself to the divine gives himself to you. So if you don't think of yourself and your safety and I, me, and you're thinking of the divine, then to that extent the divine's coming forward and taking care of you and doing everything for you. But it's like once Mother jokingly said that if you are so concerned about looking after yourself, then why should I look after you? So the more you give yourself to the divine, the more the divine looks after you. Eckhart Tolle says it beautifully, only were they saved who did not want to be safe. Only were they saved who did not want to be safe. But if I'm constantly being self-preservative, self-regard, self-look, to that extent I shut myself away from my source, the divine reality that I am.
Also tends to happen, at least with me, that I've observed there are times when you feel it, you're with the presence, but there's that return back to wanting to be in an unsettled state. It's
Yeah.
like the element in us, as we keep saying, that what is it?
Element that betrays God.
Yeah, it's almost
That's a line in Savitri.
It's almost as though, despite the peace being there, there's a part of you which is used to being disturbed.
Yes.
It's like a pattern
So
of
that
behavior.
vital has to change.
Yeah, that pattern of behavior, I feel sometimes more than mentally, there's an emotional pattern of wanting to be disturbed, I feel.
Because that's your comfort
It's
zone.
almost like you feel bored that, oh, there's nothing happening.
You want
It's a
drama.
spice factor. It's like eating dal rice every day, and then one day you're like, kuch tadka marte hain isme.
Huh.
That's how the mind is sometimes. You want that little element of what. Now you're looking for trouble. There are days I know I'm looking for trouble.
So then you'll get it. But that's also not
That's
in
human
vain,
nature.
because you'll burn your hands again and again till you feel, now I don't want to put my hand in fire.
It's a growth.
It's a growth.
Learning curve. I guess.
Yes.
But Anahita, even sometimes you can completely just want to let go of something and just say, Mother, take care of it. But even that, sometimes it's not never 100%. Right?
It's not.
Because
You
you're
want to,
always-
but you're not able to.
You still have to act out. I mean, whatever the situation is.
But the
you
action
have
the
to-
mother will take if you really surrender to her.
Which happens.
Yes.
That happens, but you are still like asked to also, put in your bit or say your things. And
So
sometimes
you
don't
put
want
your
to do
b-
that also, but it's not 100%. That's what I feel.
Nothing's going to be 100% till we are transformed, no?
Basically, even when you want to surrender, what I understand, yet you cling on to the very same thing.
Yes. You don't, you feel if you give it away, it'll come to harm. So Raman Maharishi used to say a very beautiful story of the wise and foolish traveler. He used to say life is like a train and all of us have backpacks, okay, all the burdens we are carrying. The foolish traveler gets into the train compartment and feels that if he puts down the backpack, something bad will happen. So he keeps it strapped to his back till his back hurts so much that he is forced to shed it down. The wise traveler gets onto the train, immediately puts his backpack down because he knows that the train is anyway carrying him and his backpack, right? The floor of the train is carrying both. So if he releases the backpack into the floor of the train, he can sit back and enjoy the journey. So we feel if we give it away to the divine, it won't work out. The divine may listen, may not listen. I have to keep doing something to keep it safe. So again, it's a growth process.
No, the one observation. Please go on.
How does this reconcile with the cliche that we hear that God helps those who help themselves?
Yeah.
Because here we are saying that we
So
offer
the best
everything.
help I can give myself is to dissolve the ego and offer everything to Mother. So that personal effort goes on happening, and it's not that you won't do. You'll do the best, but your action will be a surrendered action. So dropping the backpack means dropping the emotional load and burden of worrying about it.
No, like,
How does one know that the ego has become perfect now to be ready to be offered? You said that the ego has to be perfected first.
So if you're a person who doesn't have a mind of your own, who thinks one way today and tomorrow somebody will tell you something else, you'll start thinking that way, you're not individualized. Then continue to love and offer Mother, but also work on individualizing your own thought process. Become an individualized being. Otherwise, even if you try, you won't be able to offer. It won't only authentically happen.
no, I was just reminded of that gold chain incident that happened to me. That how that transition. So, just a quick thing. What had happened was I was going.
No,
on a
you
bike.
need to come here if you're
They
telling
hear
us.
me, they hear me.
Just come
Loud
here.
enough.
Okay.
Loud
Ah.
enough. So I was going on a bike with Varun actually, and we were caught somewhere, and suddenly I was honking because someone was blocking the street, and I kept honking, and they wouldn't move, and then suddenly they just ran away, and I was surrounded by a mob of people, and there are these 2-3 thug-like people who started bullying me and started misbehaving. And I went into a mode where I went into my ego. So I wanted to prove my point that you're being incorrect, you're misbehaving. And I said, please come with me to the police station. Now it so happened that in that moment I was in the lane, I was walking with them, suddenly they started beating me up. They surrounded me, 3 goons surrounded me and started beating me up. And obviously for me, the first knee-jerk reaction was not to fight back or hit them, I just was shocked. But then I went running to the police station. Now when I went to the police station, I was telling them that this is wrong, blah blah blah. They said that there's no use, these are thugs, they behave like this regularly, they have constant cases against them, and that you will be in bigger trouble. Now in that moment, I felt a moment where something in me just collapsed. I felt like, okay, now I don't want to be in this mode where my self-righteousness is important, it's better to surrender. And then I can actually remember that there's something like a lens that fell off and I felt silent. And then I just said sorry to everything, and I just said it's okay. My ego had just melted in that moment. And even when I was returning back, 2-3 other people came and slapped me and beat me again. But it didn't matter. And even after that, I went for a walk with her and I said that it doesn't matter, because this was a lesson, a very hard lesson for me, to teach me that it is not about the ego, it's about your surrender. If I was surrendered from the start, this wouldn't have happened
Yes,
to me.
yes.
And I was hurt, my gold chain was stolen, everything had happened, but I came out richer.
Yes.
Now there, I feel yet the divine acted, because the worst didn't happen. Varun didn't get hurt. I was beaten up a little, which is alright, I needed that beating maybe. So it's a learning curve. So I feel even the divine action isn't always a very beautiful one. It doesn't need to be an exaggerated.
It can be. It will be beautiful in proportion to how beautiful we grow
we
into.
Can open to it.
Yeah.
So it's a learning for me. But
Yes.
this really applies that ego thing, that when you let go of your ego, it doesn't matter whatever happens.
Yes, you become the sky. Whatever's thrown into you, it doesn't stain it.
But that's nice of you to share, because we all go through these things, not in different proportions, not beaten up, but different proportions where you then after some time you're like, enough, like you just don't want to like say it more, you just feel silent and let it be.
Maybe I was stuffed though to need. God needed to really give me a few whacks at that time.
A disciple complained that people took mother's time with questions often useless, while less and less time was left for her to attend to apparently more important work. The mother commented, "It has to be like that since it is like that. It is perhaps a lesson, but it has a purpose. The lesson I have to understand, I'm trying to understand, I'm learning to be patient. Oh, such patience. Always there are revolts, insults, to mother also. There are revolts, insults, all that. For me it is absolutely zero, and sometimes it is even amusing." So mother was a great Vedantin. She was somebody who had really conquered her ego. When I'm in my own condition, the true condition of compassion, it changes nothing. It does not raise even a small ripple on the surface, nothing. The question was put to me yesterday. I was asked if insult, the feeling of being insulted and what is called in English self-respect, had any place in the sadhana. No, a lot of us feel my self-respect is being humiliated. How can you talk to me like that? How can you insult me in front of people? So mother, being mother, was insulted by many people. There are, I mean, for us, very sad stories of things that happened, but look how she took it. Of course, there is no place for it in sadhana, it is well understood. But I have seen the movement, it was very clear. I have seen that without ego, when the ego is not there, there cannot be this sort of ruffle in the being. So see what Nash was saying, when his ego dropped, even when he was slapped, it didn't matter. Mother saying the same thing, even when she's insulted or whatever, to her it doesn't matter. Because I went back far into the past to a time when I still used to feel it many years ago. But now it is no longer something foreign, even it is impossible to feel like my self-respect has been hurt. The whole being, and even it is strange, even the physical constitution does not understand what that means. It's the same thing when there is materially a shock. Mother shows a scratch on her elbow, like that for example. It is no longer felt as one feels an injury. It is no longer felt like that. Most often there is nothing at all. It passes absolutely unperceived in the whole. But when something is felt, it is only the impression, a very, very gentle, very intimate impression of a help seeking to make itself felt, a lesson that is to be learnt. But one does not in a mental way in which there is always a stiffening. It is not that. It is immediately a sort of offering of the being which gives itself in order to learn. I am speaking of the cells. It's very interesting. Evidently, if you mentalize, you must say that it is the feeling or consciousness of the divine presence in all things, and that the mode of contact derives from the state in which you are. Yes, that is the experience of the body. And in individuals, when there is a knock or shock, always the only perception is a clear vision of the ego manifesting itself. They say it is the other. He hit me, he wounded my self-respect. I would not say, oh, that one was angry, or oh, this one. No, it is his ego. Not even his ego, the ego principle. The ego principle which still intervenes. So it's very beautiful what she's saying. Once you've seen through the truth of yourself and you don't take your ego very seriously, you won't take the ego of somebody else also very seriously. If a person behaves badly, you won't say A is so bad. You will just recognize that it was a conditioned thought pattern arising in him at that moment which made him behave like that. But just the way I am not the conditioned thought pattern that arises in me as my ego, the person I'm interacting with is also not the conditioned thought pattern arising as that person's ego. Behind the ego, there is still the presence which we may call Mother, Krishna, whatever. So Mother didn't take her ego seriously, so it was impossible for her to take anyone else's ego seriously. It is very interesting because the ego has become for me a kind of impersonal entity, while for everybody else it is the acute sense of his personality. So beautiful for somebody who has lived this. She says, for me the ego has become an impersonal entity, means I'm not only identified with it, it's not personal to me. It's like a radio playing outside me. While for everybody else, it's the acute sense of his personality. Instead of that, it is a kind of way of being which is in a greater or lesser quantity here or there, giving each one the illusion of personality. It is very interesting. When humanity was first created, the ego was the unifying element. It was around the ego that the different states of being were grouped. But now that the birth of superhumanity is being prepared, the ego has to disappear and give way to the psychic being which has slowly been formed by divine intervention in order to manifest the divine in the human being. It is under the psychic influence that the divine manifests in man and thus prepares the coming of the superhumanity. The psychic is immortal, and it is through the psychic that mortality can manifest on earth. So somewhere we'll stop here, maybe we'll cover the rest next time. So Mother has said somewhere very beautifully, I ask you only one thing, do not listen to the ego. What an ocean of words she said in that. No, I ask you only one thing, don't listen to your ego. In other words, what is she asking you not to listen to? To your narratives, because your narratives will always be around a central character which is I. And that central character which is I is your ego. So whatever it's saying, don't listen to it. Step back, silence your mind, recognize it as a conditioned thought pattern. And the moment you recognize that, in that recognition, it's offered to its source. Right? It's like something's flowing out of the source. If I take that as me, I'm pulling it out of my source. The moment I recognize that there's no me, there's a release, it goes back to its source. It goes back to its divine truth. So when the Buddha was asked by Ananda, sum up your teachings in one sentence, he said, I'll do better than that, I'll give you a gesture. And he did this, the big individualizing into the ego, I, me, mine, and then he did this, giving it away. So releasing the sense of I is this gesture, that's self-giving. Every time you release the ego, there's a movement of joy that comes. And every time you're inhabited by the ego, identified with it, you're unhappy. Just try it. Every time you give away the ego, there'll be a moment of joy. Because when the ego comes forward, the self retreats. And the self is joy. Yeah? So practice this. Very recommended that you hear the talk again, pause. If something feels like you can practice it, pause the talk, hear it again, try to live it, try to bring it into your life. Let's end with 3 ohms. Om.